Welcome to the story. Black owner is kicked out of his own store by racist manager, then returns to delivers justice. Watch as this racist store owner gets a dose of instant karma after kicking out a black man from his store. The shocking incident was caught on camera and has left many people outraged. The store owner's discriminatory behavior is unacceptable, and it's amazing to see him get what's coming to him. This video is a must-see for anyone who believes in equality and justice for all. Get ready to feel a sense of satisfaction as karma takes its course. Inform us if you are enthusiastic about this narrative. If you are, press 1 if you found the video to be enjoyable. If this is not the case, press 0. Your comments are a great source of motivation for me to collect more stories that are uplifting and meaningful. Blackwell stared out of his corner office window, watching the bustling city of Manhattan unfold beneath him. It was a sight he had grown accustomed to over the years, yet today it felt different. His empire, a chain of high-end luxury stores, stretched across the country, from New York to Los Angeles, a testament to years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination. As a black man in a predominantly white industry, his journey had been anything but easy. Born to working-class parents in Harlem, Darius had faced prejudice from an early age. Even as a child, he understood that his skin color carried with it a set of assumptions that others imposed on him without hesitation. Teachers told him to aim for something realistic when he expressed his dream of becoming a businessman. Classmates mocked his ambition, assuming he could never rise above his circumstances. But Darius, with the unyielding support of his parents, pushed past those limitations. As he rose through the ranks of the business world, first as a young, hungry entrepreneur, then as a titan of luxury retail, he had learned that success could never completely shield him from the ugliness of racism. Despite owning a multi-million-dollar company, he was still often viewed with skepticism, his wealth and status scrutinized more than celebrated. He had learned to expect subtle, insidious discrimination, the kind that often came cloaked in politeness. But what bothered him the most was when his success, his empire, his blood, sweat, and tears was used as a platform for others to express the very bigotry he had fought to overcome. That's why the rumors about one of his store managers, Ethan Caldwell, had hit him harder than he expected. For weeks, Darius had heard murmurs from employees and even some customers about the toxic atmosphere at one of his flagship stores in Soho. According to multiple sources, Ethan ran the store like a personal fiefdom, catering to wealthy clients, but turning away those who didn't fit the profile of what he believed a luxury shopper should look like. The whispers didn't explicitly mention race, but Darius knew better. It was always about race. It always had been. Darius leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. He had built his company on the idea that luxury should be inclusive, that anyone, regardless of their background, should feel welcome in his stores. It was part of what made his brand different from the stuffy, exclusive establishments that had dominated the industry for so long. He had trained his staff to embody those values. So how had someone like Ethan slipped through the cracks? There had been complaints, of course, but Ethan's sales numbers were stellar. He had cultivated relationships with high-end clients, bringing in a steady stream of revenue. On paper, he looked like the perfect manager. But Darius knew better than to trust numbers alone. He needed to see it for himself, to know whether the rumors were true before taking action. He needed to experience what his customers, his real customers, were going through. He turned away from the window, the decision already made in his mind. He would visit the store, but not as Darius Blackwell, the owner of the chain. No, he would go undercover, blending in as just another face in the crowd. He'd done it before when he first launched his business, visiting stores in disguise to gauge customer experience. But now it felt different. This wasn't about improving service. This was about confronting something far more personal, prejudice in his own house. Later that night, as he rummaged through his wardrobe for the perfect disguise, Darius allowed himself a bitter smile. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who could walk into any of his stores and buy whatever he wanted would now have to present himself as someone completely different, just to be treated fairly. He chose a simple outfit: jeans, a plain black hoodie, and sneakers. He left the Rolex in the drawer and slipped on a basic wristwatch instead. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the hood over his head, a wave of memories flooded him. He remembered the times he had been followed by security guards in department stores, the sales associates who had dismissed him before he made his first million, and the landlords who had turned him away because they didn't think a black man could afford to live in their high-rise buildings. Those experiences had left scars that time and money hadn't fully healed. It wasn't long before he realized that this undercover mission wasn't just about Ethan. It was about confronting the racism that had been a shadow over his life and career, even when he thought he had outrun it. It was about the unspoken belief that a black man didn't belong in certain spaces unless he had a platinum card to prove it. "Let's see how this plays out," Darius muttered to himself as he grabbed his keys and left his penthouse. The Soho store was one of his largest and most profitable locations, nestled in the heart of Manhattan's upscale shopping district. It attracted a diverse clientele: tourists, socialites, and the city's elite. But lately, word had spread that it wasn't as welcoming as it used to be. Darius arrived in the evening when the streets were still busy, but the store was winding down for the day. As he approached the entrance, he felt the familiar sense of anticipation. This wasn't just a store to him. It was a reflection of everything he had worked for, everything he had built from the ground up. Yet as he stepped through the glass doors, he immediately sensed something off. The atmosphere was cold. The luxurious interior, with its polished marble floors and sleek black and gold displays, seemed uninviting. Darius walked over to a display case featuring a collection of designer watches, but no one acknowledged him. Not the security guard by the door, nor the sales associates, who were too busy fawning over a wealthy-looking couple in tailored suits. He waited, casually browsing the watches, but still, no one approached him. He could feel the familiar sting of invisibility, the same sting he had felt in his youth. The sensation wasn't new, but it was infuriating all the same. He decided to take things a step further. Moving towards the back of the store, he picked up a high-end leather bag and examined it closely, pretending to be interested. Seconds later, he saw him. The manager, Ethan Caldwell, emerge from the staff area, his eyes scanning the store like a hawk. Ethan was tall, clean-cut, and dressed impeccably in a slim-fit suit, the kind of man who exuded confidence and control. Darius knew what was coming. He had seen that look before. Ethan didn't see a potential customer. He saw a black man in a hoodie touching a $5,000 bag, and that was all he needed to make his judgment. Darius gripped the leather bag, feeling the smooth material beneath his fingertips. The kind of bag he'd purchased countless times for himself and others. Yet in this moment, it felt different. The weight of judgment in the air was palpable, almost suffocating. He glanced up to see Ethan Caldwell, the store manager, making his way toward him with measured steps. His eyes locked onto Darius, a subtle sneer curling the corner of his mouth. Ethan didn't bother with the pretense of politeness. He marched up, cutting through the air of luxury like a knife through tension. Darius could see the wheels turning in his head, the quick calculation of a man who had sized him up and made his decision. Ethan looked past the quality of Darius's clothing, the quiet confidence in his posture. None of that mattered. In Ethan's eyes, Darius was a black man who didn't belong. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice clipped and cold. "Is there something I can help you with?" Darius turned, still holding the leather bag, and smiled, more out of habit than anything else. "Just looking. I've been thinking about picking up a new bag. This one caught my eye." Ethan barely glanced at the bag. Instead, his eyes flicked over Darius's hoodie and sneakers, as though confirming his suspicions. "That's quite an expensive item. Are you sure it's in your price range?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Darius felt the jab, but he kept his cool. Years of enduring this kind of subtle racism had made him adept at controlling his reactions. Still, it never got any easier. "I'm aware of the price," Darius replied, keeping his voice steady. "I'll let you know if I need any assistance." Ethan didn't move. He folded his arms across his chest and leaned slightly forward, as if to establish dominance. "Well, I just want to make sure you understand," he said, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't the kind of store where you browse for fun. It's a high-end establishment, and we expect serious customers." Darius took a slow breath, his grip tightening around the bag's handle. "I think I know what kind of store this is," he said quietly, meeting Ethan's gaze. The tension between them thickened. Ethan looked around as if searching for backup from his staff. Darius could see the unease in the eyes of the sales associates nearby. They were watching too, but none of them stepped in. The silent complicity was all too familiar. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Ethan said after a beat, his voice low and firm. "We don't allow loitering, and if you're not here to buy something, you're wasting my time." Darius stared at him for a long moment. It wasn't the first time he had been kicked out of a store. In fact, this moment was an echo of dozens of experiences throughout his life. But this time, it wasn't just any store. This was his store. He owned it. The irony was almost too much to bear. He could feel his blood boiling, the desire to lash out rising within him. But this wasn't the moment for that. He had come here to see the truth for himself. And now that truth was glaring back at him through the smug face of Ethan Caldwell. Darius set the bag back down on the shelf with deliberate care, straightened up and adjusted his hoodie. He nodded once, more to himself than to Ethan, and turned to leave. As he walked away, he felt the eyes of the staff on his back, their judgment clinging to him like smoke. But he didn't falter. "Have a nice day," Ethan called out, his voice laced with sarcasm. Darius could almost hear the smirk in his words. Outside, the cool air of Soho hit him like a slap in the face. He stood for a moment, letting the tension drain from his body. It took every ounce of self-control not to march back into the store and reveal who he really was, to watch Ethan's face twist in horror as he realized he had just thrown out the owner of the entire chain. But Darius knew better than to act on impulse. He was a businessman, and a good businessman knew how to wait for the right moment to strike. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his assistant, Lauren, reminding him of a board meeting the next morning. Darius smiled to himself, already picturing the look on Ethan's face when he walked through the store's doors tomorrow, dressed not as a casual shopper, but as the CEO. That night, Darius replayed the day's events in his mind. He sat at the dinner table, pushing his food around his plate as the memory of Ethan's smug face lingered. It wasn't just about Ethan, it was about what Ethan represented. This was bigger than one racist store manager. This was a reminder that no matter how successful he became, no matter how many millions he made, there were still people who saw him as lesser. People like Ethan, who would never believe that a man like Darius could be their boss, let alone the owner of an empire. Darius set his fork down and wiped his mouth with a napkin. His resolve hardened. Tomorrow, things would change. The next morning, he arrived at his corporate office early, dressed in one of his finest suits. The crisp navy fabric hugged his tall frame perfectly, and the polished leather shoes gleamed as he walked. He felt powerful, not just because of the suit, but because of what he was about to do. He had built his company from nothing, and no one, not Ethan Caldwell or anyone else, would take that away from him. "Lauren," he said, stepping into his office, "let Ethan know I'll be visiting the Soho store this afternoon. I want him and the entire staff ready for my arrival." Lauren nodded, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. She didn't ask questions. She knew Darius well enough to understand that when he was like this, something big was about to happen. By noon, the Soho store was buzzing with anticipation. The staff had been informed that Darius Blackwell, the elusive CEO of the entire chain, would be making a personal visit. Ethan, ever the showman, had gone into overdrive, making sure everything was perfect. He wanted to impress the man who held the keys to his future. He had no idea what was coming. When Darius arrived, the difference in the store's atmosphere was palpable. The same staff who had ignored him the day before were now standing at attention, their smiles wide, their voices eager. Ethan was in the center of it all, barking orders like a drill sergeant, ensuring that every corner of the store sparkled. He wore the same slim-fit suit, looking every bit the polished manager who catered to Manhattan's elite. But when Darius walked through the doors, this time in his tailored suit, something shifted. Ethan's confident smile faltered for just a second. His eyes scanned Darius's face, recognition flickering behind his expression, but the manager quickly pushed it aside. To him, this was a different man, a man worthy of respect. Not the hoodie-clad stranger he had dismissed the day before. "Mr. Blackwell," Ethan greeted with a broad smile, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Welcome to the Soho store. We've been expecting you." Darius shook his hand, the weight of the moment settling between them like a live wire. Ethan didn't recognize him, at least, not yet. "I've heard a lot about this location," Darius said, his voice smooth and calm. "I wanted to see how things are running here." Ethan puffed out his chest, clearly pleased to have the CEO's attention. "We run a tight ship here. Our clients expect nothing but the best, and we make sure to deliver." "I'm sure you do," Darius replied, his eyes scanning the store, noting the staff's sudden eagerness to serve. "But I had an interesting experience here yesterday. You see, I came in looking for a new bag, and I didn't get quite the warm welcome I was expecting." Ethan's smile wavered. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Darius said, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "You personally escorted me out of the store." The color drained from Ethan's face as realization dawned. His eyes widened, and he took a small step back, his composure crumbling. I didn't realize." Darius let the silence hang between them for a moment, savoring the shift in power. "Now you do." Darius watched the horror wash over Ethan's face, the manager's confident facade crumbling in real time. It was a moment Darius had anticipated, but as it unfolded, he felt no joy, no satisfaction, just the cold weight of reality. This wasn't about proving Ethan wrong or seeking revenge. This was about making things right, not just for himself, but for every customer who had walked through those doors and been treated the same way. Ethan stammered, struggling to regain his composure. I didn't realize it was you. If I had known." "That's the point," Darius interrupted, his voice firm but calm. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic respect. I came in yesterday like any other customer, but instead of being welcomed, I was treated like I didn't belong. You assumed, based on how I looked, that I couldn't afford to shop here, and you weren't subtle about it." Ethan's face flushed red, a mix of embarrassment and fear. He glanced around, noticing the staff watching from a distance, their curiosity barely masked. Darius could see the panic in his eyes as he realized his future hung in the balance. "I can explain," Ethan stammered, his hands trembling slightly. "There was a misunderstanding. We've had issues with people coming in just to browse, and sometimes we have to be more selective with our attention." Darius shook his head, cutting him off. "Selective with your attention? That's an interesting way to put it. Let me tell you something, Ethan. I've worked hard to build this company from the ground up. I didn't inherit it. I didn't have it handed to me on a silver platter. I earned every bit of it, and I did it by believing that luxury isn't just for the wealthy elite. It's for anyone who values quality and is willing to invest in it." Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the staff, who were still watching the scene unfold. He clearly hadn't anticipated this turn of events, and Darius could see the wheels turning in his head as he scrambled for an explanation that would save him. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand," Ethan said, his voice shaky. "I made a mistake. I didn't recognize you, and I was wrong to treat you that way. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." Darius took a deep breath, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. The weight of Ethan's words felt hollow, like a man grasping for something that was already slipping through his fingers. He could have walked away right then, fired Ethan on the spot, and left him to pick up the pieces of his career. But Darius wasn't here to simply punish. He was here to make sure the lesson was learned, not just by Ethan, but by everyone. "Here's what we're going to do," Darius said, his tone measured. "I'm not just going to fire you, Ethan. That would be too easy. You'd walk out of here with nothing learned, and the next place you work, you'd likely repeat the same mistakes." Ethan's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering in them as if he might be spared. "No, you're going to stay," Darius continued, his voice low but firm. "You're going to work here until the end of the month, and during that time, you're going to personally greet every single customer who walks through that door. You'll offer them the same level of service you would for one of your high-profile clients, and you'll do it with a smile on your face, no matter who they are or what they look like." Ethan blinked, clearly taken aback. "But Mr. Blackwell..." Darius raised a hand, cutting him off. "You're going to learn what it means to serve every customer with respect. If you can't do that, then you'll be let go, and I'll make sure no one in this industry hires you again. I'll personally see to it." Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He seemed unsure of how to respond. The weight of Darius's words settled heavily on him. His face flushed and his hands trembling as he nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." Darius nodded once. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some other matters to attend to." With that, Darius turned and walked toward the back of the store, where his regional manager, Rebecca Hill, was waiting. Rebecca had been with him since the early days, a no-nonsense woman who had helped Darius build the business from the ground up. She had watched the entire interaction unfold, her arms crossed and a small, approving smile playing on her lips. "Nice job," she said as Darius approached. Darius sighed, shaking his head. "I didn't do it for satisfaction. It's just exhausting, you know? This isn't the first time I've dealt with this, and it won't be the last." Rebecca nodded, her expression softening. "You're right. But what you did just now, it's a statement. Not just to Ethan, but to the rest of the staff and to the customers. You're showing them that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated." Darius glanced around the store, noticing how the other employees were still buzzing with nervous energy. He could feel their eyes on him, some curious, others anxious. He knew this moment would ripple through the company. "We need to do more," Darius said, his voice firm. "This can't be just a one-time thing. I want to implement a company-wide diversity and inclusion training program. Every manager, every staff member, everyone needs to be on the same page about how we treat people, regardless of their background." Rebecca smiled. "I've been waiting for you to say that. I'll start working on it immediately." Darius nodded. "And keep an eye on Ethan. If he slips up even once, I want him gone." Rebecca chuckled. "I don't think he's going to risk it after today." Darius allowed himself a small smile, but the weight of the day still hung over him. He had done what needed to be done, but it didn't erase the frustration that came with having to fight this battle again and again. He had spent years proving himself in an industry that didn't expect him to succeed, only to find that no amount of success could fully shield him from the ugliness of prejudice. As he left the store, the afternoon sun hit him, casting long shadows across the busy streets of Soho. People moved past him, unaware of the battle he had just fought inside. To them, he was just another man in a suit. But to Darius, this was more than just another day. It was a reminder that the fight for respect and equality was far from over. That evening, Darius returned to his penthouse, his mind still buzzing with the events of the day. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below. Despite the satisfaction of setting things right, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more work to be done. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Rebecca. "Training program outline is in progress. "We'll get this done." Darius smiled, setting his phone aside. It wasn't just about what had happened with Ethan. It was about making sure no one else in his company ever felt the way he had felt yesterday. He had the power to change things, and he was determined to use it. The next day, the incident had spread like wildfire among the staff. Ethan, now humbled, took his place at the front of the store, greeting customers with a nervous smile. Word had traveled through the grapevine, and employees across the company knew that Darius had personally dealt with the situation. The respect for him deepened, and the message was clear. This was a company that valued everyone, no matter who they were. Over the next few weeks, Darius rolled out the new diversity and inclusion training across all his stores. He personally attended some of the sessions, making sure his managers understood the importance of what they were doing. He didn't just want this to be a corporate checkbox. He wanted it to be a core part of the company's culture. The impact was immediate. Employees who had once felt marginalized began to speak up, sharing their experiences and feeling heard for the first time. The training sessions opened up difficult but necessary conversations about race, privilege, and bias, and Darius could feel the shift in the air. But even with all the progress, Darius knew there would always be more work to do. The fight for equality wasn't something that could be solved overnight, and it certainly wouldn't be solved by one man. But he had done his part, and he would continue to do so, leading by example and making sure that his stores were a place where everyone felt welcome. Weeks later, Darius found himself back in Soho, this time walking into the store with no fanfare, no plan, and no disguise. He strolled through the doors, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, the same way he had the first time. But this time, the atmosphere was different. The staff greeted him warmly, with genuine smiles, not recognizing him at first, but treating him with the respect every customer deserved. He wandered through the displays, taking his time, and when he reached the watch section, a young sales associate approached him. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you with anything?" she asked, her tone polite and professional. Darius smiled. "Just browsing, thank you." As he moved through the store, he caught sight of Ethan, still managing the store but with a much more subdued demeanor. Ethan spotted Darius, his face flushing slightly, but he didn't panic this time. Instead, he nodded respectfully, his expression one of quiet acknowledgement. Darius returned the nod and continued browsing. The change had taken root, and while the memory of what had happened still lingered, he knew he had done what was necessary. The company was better for it, and so was he. As Darius left the store and stepped back out onto the bustling streets of Soho, he felt a sense of peace. He had built his empire to be a beacon of quality and excellence, but now it was also a beacon of something even more important: respect and dignity for all. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that the next one appearing on the screen will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe, press a like button, and click on notification bell. Thank you, and see you in the next one.